Hi everybody. So for this video, I'm doing somebody who again has some traits of antisocial personality disorder. This week is Charles Manson, somebody that majority, if not all of us have heard of at some point or another, and who actually passed away just a few years ago. Um, and he had kind of a messed up life. He had a lot going on as a kid, and unfortunately, part of that led to the crimes that he committed. Um, so he was actually born in November of 1934. And of course, he's well known for being convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy for the death of 7 people, including actress Sharon Tate, who was, I believe, about 8 months pregnant at the time of her death, and was literally weeks away from having her baby, which is very, very sad. Um, so his mother, her name was Kathleen Manson Bauer Cavender. Um, and when Charles was born, he was born Charles Miles Maddock. And his father was Colonel Walker Henderson Scott. Um, and from what I can understand, they were never married. So his mom filed a paternity suit that resulted uh, in an agreed upon judgment in 1937. So Manson most likely never knew his father. Had If he knew anything of his father, it was very minimal interactions and more or less what people had told him. And his father was a con artist, and he actually tried to make people believe that he was a colonel in the army, even though Colonel was actually his given name. He wanted people to believe that he was kind of more important than he was. So then in August of 1934, Manson's mother married William Manson, and that's actually where Charles got his iconic last name. But they divorced in April of 1937, after William's, Charles' father, or stepfather, was alleged of gross negligence of duty by his wife. And his mother actually got arrested a few times very early on in his life. So that's kind of what he experienced very early. And she got arrested for assault and battery. And he was actually placed in a home with his aunt and uncle in West Virginia. And when his mom was released from prison after she had served her sentence, she moved to West Virginia to live with Charles. And Charles actually spent most of his time during that time while his mom was in prison and after, being just away from school. His mom spent her nights drinking, and they, in late 1930s, early 1940s, Catherine, Charles's mom, and Charles moved to Indianapolis, where Kathleen met a recovering alcoholic in AA and got married again in 1943. And during this time, so when he was about 9 years old, so this would have been about same year, 1943, Charles actually claimed that he set a school on fire. And he was consistently in trouble for petty theft, and being truant from school, so not going to school. And he was eventually taken away from his mom because she was not doing anything to correct his behavior. And so because of, at the time, the lack of like foster care placements and foster care stuff, foster care accessibility, he was actually placed in the Gilbert School for Boys in Indiana, which was a school made for delinquents, and it was run by the Catholic Church. There, it was really not a good place to be because many of them were punished by the smallest infractions. And eventually, Manson ran away. He actually spent his time living in the woods, under bridges, other places that he could find shelter. So, making like lean-tos and stuff. And eventually he made his way back to his mom. But unfortunately, his mom made him go back to the Gilbert school. So about 10 months after his mom had returned him to Gilbert, he actually ran away again. This time he made his way to Indianapolis, where he actually committed his first known crime, which was he stole food from a grocery store to feed himself. And from my understanding, behind one of the registers found a cigar box that had about $100 in it. All this used to be able to buy food, actually get a room to rent out on Skid Row, just so that he had a place to stay. And he was also working as a message boy to kind of supplement that money, so to continue to buy food and continue to have a roof over his head. But he continued to do petty thefts, and he was again caught and sent to a juvenile center in Omaha, Nebraska. And then 4 days after he arrived there, him and another boy actually stole a car and a gun, and then used it to commit a series of armed robberies in Peoria, Illinois. So they had obviously left the juvenile center. And then the boy that Charles had left Omaha with, his uncle is actually a professional thief, and kind of took the two of them under his wing to teach them, this is what it means to be a thief, and a professional at that. But Manson was actually arrested 2 days later and sent to the Indiana Boys School. This was different than the Gilbert School, where he was allegedly beaten and raped, apparently under the encouragement of staff members. And he apparently tried to run away about 18 times. And eventually, a psychiatrist actually recommended that Manson was transferred to a minimum security institution. It was called Natural Bridge Honor Camp. And that's where eventually his aunt came and visited him and said, hey, you can stay at my place. I'll help you find work and you'll have a roof over your head. So he was up for parole from the honor camp in 1952, but because he had committed a bunch of serious disciplinary offenses, he was not paroled right away. So then he was actually moved to a max parole location in Ohio. I don't even know exactly where in Ohio, but it was in Ohio. So then later on, Manson married a hospital waitress, and they actually had a child together. But because of a series of violent offenses towards her, he was not paroled to live with her. And then he eventually did get paroled. And then in 1958, he was charged with attempting to forge a check, which is, of course, fraud. And then in 1966, he was arrested a second time. That crime, I couldn't find out exactly what he did, but he was arrested for a second time. And then slowly he kind of started creating his cult. He made some friends around, and he would lure people that just kind of they were trying to find a place to fit in. And it was not uncommon for him to give them drugs as well. So that tempted people a lot more around this time period because, oh, this guy's giving drugs and he's kind of a hippie. I'm willing to listen to him. So it started when he met librarian Mary Brunner. I believe I'm pronouncing her name correctly. And he somehow convinced her to let him stay at her house. And eventually that became a permanent arrangement. He became a permanent roommate. And then they met Lynette Fromm. They called her Squeaky, who was a runaway teen and convinced her to stay with them. So, they're kind of starting the Manson family through these couple of people. And he would convince people to listen to his ranting about counterculture and spoke mostly to the outcast and the emotionally insecure people of the time. And he gave people that listened to him and followed him LSD in a way of kind of trying to control them, because if he got them addicted and he was the one giving it to them, oh, they're gonna follow me. And he would actually take some himself, but a lot of his followers said that, he would give everybody around him a certain dose, but he would take a lot less so then he could kind of keep his wits about them. He could continue his rants and not sound any more kind of crazy than he already did. So then he ranted quite a bit about his doomsday beliefs, and he became fixated on an imminent race war, an imminent apocalyptic race war. Now, there's some debate about kind of what started this and what started all the crimes. There is the Helter Skelter, from the song from the Beatles, that he got the idea from there. But that's not 100% like proven that that's actually what he was going off of. So it's not 100% clear if that's legitimately why he was doing this. So then in August of 1969, the family committed several murders across the city of Los Angeles. And part of it started because one of the people in the family went to go get drugs for the family and didn't have the money to pay for it, but was like, hey, here's my girlfriend, keep her as collateral until I get back. But then that guy ended up getting killed because she was being kept as collateral. So then that kind of escalated things like, oh, this guy got killed because of us, so they're going to be on our tail. And then things kind of escalated like, oh, they're tracking us, they know our methods, so we have to go kill these people and then these people. It was kind of a hot mess of, Charles was telling people to do stuff because he potentially believed that if they figured out it was him for the one, it was this whole spider web of kind of craziness. And I'll link a video down below in the description of somebody that goes through his crimes a little more in depth than I am. I'm doing a very brief breakdown, but I like the way that this other YouTuber does it. Her name's Bailey Sarian. She does a lot of true crime as well, and she does a longer breakdown of some of the same killers that I am. So then all killings were directed by Charles himself, but he was only actually around for only a couple of the murders. And there's claims that he himself never committed any of the murders. He was just the one that told his followers, hey, go kill these guys. I have a cat that is being adorable and wanting all the attention, so she's going to get it. Actually not. So then in July of 1970, the Manson family murder trial started. And Manson actually appeared in court with an X carved in his forehead, which is one of the notorious things that you see a lot in pictures. So ultimately, him and several of his followers were convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy, and he was sentenced to the death penalty. His followers, the ones that were convicted, I believe, got life in prison rather than first-degree murder. And he, in the years leading up to his death, a lot of people wanted to interview him. A lot of people really wanted to kind of understand, what's going on? What's wrong with this guy? Why did he, do all of this? Why did he lead all these people to kill? And he gave a lot of very odd interviews. There's some if you look up on YouTube some of his interviews, you can kind of see how weird it is, how awkward it is for kind of everybody involved. And so ultimately he died in November of 2017, so just about 5 years ago now. And he died of a heart attack, cardiac arrest, and the resulting respiratory failure. So he had kind of a life of early crime, and unfortunately, he was witness to that very early. So, I think in some aspects, his understanding of what life is supposed to be was not necessarily the best, and kind of like, because of that exposure, it really didn't help lead him on a good path for the rest of his life. But if anybody has any questions or wants me to dive deeper into some part of Charles Manson, let me know. If you have anybody that I want to talk about, that you want me to talk about in the future, feel free to leave it down in the comments, and I will more than likely do a future video on that person. Have a great day, everybody.